Hi, the thing we are doing is called self-transfiguration. Self-transfiguration is that ultimate state, ultimate things that man should be doing that will make man really, really extraordinary. The topic for this session is the mind. Now, the mind refers to the ordinary places and states of this life. That is outsideness. It refers to outsideness. Those places and states that are ordinary, places and states of time and space. Those places and states within time and space. That's what I call the mind. Because the mind came from Europe. Africans were not dealing with the mind 5,000 years ago. 5,000 years ago, Africans were dealing with the heart. Because it is the heart that knows, it is the heart that sees, it is the heart that feels. But after Africa was truncated, after Africa was destabilized, and Africa, the era of Africa, the time of Africa went away, then Europe came in with colonialism and other things, and then introduced to Africans what is called mind. And that's why Africa is now scattered. Africa is now in trouble because Africa cannot work with the mind. Africa was not a mind continent. It was a continent of the heart. And that's why Africa is down. Because it will remain down, even though the era has ended, 5,000 years ended 2012. And now the new era, is another 5,000 years has begun. And it will lead up to another 5,000 years. So that time has come back. And Africa is now back within the time of Africa. And that period is the period of the mind, sorry, of the heart. Because the period of the mind reigned for 5,000 years and all that. So that's why everyone all over Africa should be happy, should be proud now, because the time of Africa is back. And that time is not of the mind, but of the heart. And the heart and the mind differ. Even though today, all the textbooks written in schools, Western education is what is taught. African education is no longer in place. African culture is disregarded. The African culture is actually superior. It is the most powerful culture in the world. When Africa was in power, over 5,000 years ago, Africa was a place where everybody was coming to. Everybody who wanted to study something fantastic was coming to Africa, and Africa had the best of everything. Everyone coming here, even Israel, was brought up in Africa. The person called Israel came to Africa. They were begging for the Pharaoh to receive them, because the wise man in that time, a wise person in that time was not the Christ, was not Buddha, but the wise person was the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh is the state of the higher brain, of 10 up to 99.9% of brain. Anybody who was big that time was a Pharaoh or a king. So the king or the Pharaoh was in power at that time and ruled all over the world. There was no challenger. There was nobody challenging the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was feared. It was a mighty power all over the world. It was the only power that existed. The Pharaoh, the king. And that was what Africa was doing. Africa didn't have presidents or governors. Africa had king or the Pharaoh who was in ancient Egypt, ancient Africa. That's what happened. So the mind is a state different from the heart, which is of the higher brain, but the mind is of the lower brain, 1 to 9.9% of the brain. That's what the mind does this with, and that is what has been in power for about 5,000 years now. So that period has just come to an end in 2012. So now we're going into the period when wisdom, when perfection and conscience will be in power, not wisdom, which has to do with the lower brain and the mind. So wisdom has to do with mind, has to do with reasoning and rationality. But the heart has to do with knowing and unknowing. That is realization and mastery, which has to do with the sage, which has to do with babies and persons who are aged, who are not running about looking for worldly things. Because the worldly things are the things that make people go into reasoning and reflection, reasoning and rationality. That's the position. So the mind is lower than the heart, and the mind is of the lower brain, while the heart is of the higher brain. That is the only difference. The time for the higher brain has come. Very soon, everybody will go into it. It will be taught in schools, and people will deal with it. And when that time comes, that's what we call paradise. That's what we call heaven. That's what we call nirvana. Because that time, when the higher brain will be in power, everybody will change, and the standards that time will not be as it is now in time and space. It will be as it should be, or as it ought to be in the omnipresent. Everybody will be in the omnipresent. Everybody will become superhuman. Everybody will be transformed. That is self-transfiguration, self-alteration, self-transmutation. Everybody will be transformed because man has all these capacities. All these great capacities are in man. Everything is within man. Heaven and hell are in man. So at that time, everything will occur, and it will be so beautiful. I encourage everyone to follow this channel, to like it, to ask questions, make comments, and follow it closely, because the time is near. The time when these things will come fully will be near. And those who enter into it early will be the rulers, will be the people dominating all over the world. Thank you very much.